The First Amendment is in trouble. We're going to talk today on The Durst Show about threats to the First Amendment, the attempt to investigate criminally the publication by John Bolton of his book critical of the administration. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about the attempt to extradite Julian Assange and bring him to the United States and put him on trial, essentially for publishing material in WikiLeaks that is critical of our country. We're going to talk about attempts to muzzle students who are expressing views different from the accepted wisdom regarding Black Lives Matter. And we'll go back and talk a bit about my lawsuit against CNN. We're going to talk about all that on The Durst Show. Today on The Durst Show, I'm going to be talking about the First Amendment and how it's in grave, grave danger from a number of sources. As you know, I filed a lawsuit against CNN. Generally, it's gotten very, very positive reaction from the public because I think many people out there are just sick and tired of having been fooled by major networks into believing facts that just aren't true or statements that weren't made. And so I've gotten a lot of support, but there have been some pushback. Hey, you're a First Amendment guy. Why are you suing CNN? The reason, of course, is because CNN violated the First Amendment and violated New York Times versus Sullivan and violated many of the important First Amendment cases. What they did is they willfully and deliberately and with malice aforethought put into my mouth the opposite of what I actually said. So I'm very comfortable as a First Amendment advocate with suing CNN. On another point of view is I'm a private citizen. The First Amendment really doesn't apply specifically to individuals like me. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. It's a restriction on the government. Now, it's also been applied to the states and it's been applied to courts. And under New York Times versus Sullivan, it also applies to lawsuits brought in the courts. But nobody would ever say that the First Amendment is absolute, certainly when it comes to individuals. I have been defamed. I have been hurt by CNN. I have rights also. The government, on the other hand, has powers, not rights. And that's why the First Amendment specifically is limited to the government. Because when the government censors, when the government comes in and tries to suppress free speech, that is the beginning of the road to tyranny. And we're seeing that more and more. Let me just give you a couple of examples from today's news. The United States government is investigating the publishers of John Bolton's book. Look, I have no brief for John Bolton or his book. I know John, I like him. I haven't read his book. I read the reports about his book, but he surely has the right to express his views about the presidency, maybe views I agree with or disagree with, but that's not the First Amendment test. The First Amendment test is, does he have the right to express his views? Now, he signed the contract when he became the National Security Advisor, and the contract required him to submit anything he publishes after he leaves his job or while he's in his job for a classification review to make sure that the material that he's publishing is not classified or doesn't reveal state secrets. And my understanding is that Bolton did that and that he got an oral clearing, but not in writing. And he went forward and published the book, and now the government is saying, well, you didn't have a formal clearance to publish the book, and maybe there is some material in there that's classified, and so we've opened a criminal investigation. That's a little scary because what's classified and what's not classified is often a matter of degree. Remember the Hillary Clinton case when she said the material on her server and on her phones was not classified. And then the FBI went back and said, well, yeah, but maybe there were a couple of things that had a big C on them. Maybe they were classified. Classification is often abused. It's often used not to protect national security or national secrets, but to protect individuals. There's an old joke they tell. When I was representing dissidents in the Soviet Union back in the 1970s and 80s, they used to tell the joke about this dissident who is put on trial because he called Stalin an idiot. And he goes to court and he says to the judge, Your Honor, I'm prepared to prove the truth of what I said, that Stalin is an idiot. And they say, no, you misunderstand. We didn't charge you with telling a lie. We charged you with revealing a state secret. Stalin was what he said he was, but the state wanted to keep that secret. Classification is often used, state secrets are often used to protect government officials from embarrassment rather than to really protect national security. So I'm concerned. I litigated a case on the First Amendment many years ago involving a man named Frank Snepp, who was the head of the CIA office in Saigon when we left Saigon after the end of the war. And he wrote a book called Decent Interval in which he really attacked the United States government policies in regard to Vietnam. And they didn't go after him criminally. They went after him civilly. They sued him, saying that he breached his contract and therefore all of his money that he made has to be given back. I think they're doing the same thing with Bolton. In the end, I hope that Bolton's book is available. It is available. I hope it's read and critiqued in the marketplace of ideas. But I don't want to see the government come in and institute criminal charges against publishers and against authors for writing a book which may be embarrassing to the administration and may inadvertently have some classified material. I think you have to show a specific intent to reveal classified material, and I doubt that can be shown in the Bolton case because he went through a classification review and has said that he got oral clearance on the telephone for publishing his book. So I hope the First Amendment isn't compromised in the Bolton case. There's another case. I'm involved in this other case directly. It's Julian Assange. You all remember him from WikiLeaks. I have been an advisor to the Julian Assange defense team now from the very beginning, and I continue to remain involved as an advisor and consultant to his defense team, so I claim no objectivity or lack of bias. But the reason I'm in the case is because I'm very worried that extraditing Assange, and he's now subject to being extradited in a case in Great Britain, extradited to the United States where he would presumably stand trial in Virginia. It worries me a lot because Assange is the guy who published the material. He's like the New York Times and the Washington Post in the Pentagon Papers case. I was also a lawyer in the Pentagon Papers case. I represented Senator Gravel, the senator from Alaska, who read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record. So I go back a long time in defending the First Amendment against the government overreaching. And I'm very concerned that the attempt to bring Julian Assange to the United States to put him on trial, now they're not claiming to put him on trial specifically for publishing material, but rather for some technical violations in terms of computer access. But in the end, it would have a major chilling effect on freedom of speech and the First Amendment. And just to remind you again, going back to what I said right in the beginning, the First Amendment is directed to the government. It says Congress. That's been interpreted to mean the states as well. Any government institutions shall not make any law abridging the freedom of speech or the press. So it's a primary restriction on government, not on individuals, but it's been applied in individual cases regarding public figures as well. I think the First Amendment is in trouble today. It's in trouble because I think a lot of young people don't appreciate freedom of speech. I have a new book coming out soon called Cancel Culture, the latest attack on freedom of speech and due process, where I argue that the cancel culture has chilled freedom of speech. People are afraid to say what they think. We see it happening all the time now. Students recently were disciplined for trying to do a memorial to police and fire people on 9/11. They were criticized and suspended by schools for praising the police and praising the fire department at a time when you're supposed to be praising only Black Lives Matter, and people who say Blue Lives Matter get canceled and get suspended. Look, we need to open up the marketplace more widely. As long as people are telling the truth, as long as people reasonably believe what they say, as long as people are not deliberately and willfully distorting what people say the way CNN did to me, I think we should decide these issues in the marketplace. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let 1,000 speeches be made. Let 1,000 podcasts be conducted. Let the public decide. We're inundated with speech today, free speech. I think we've never had as much openness and free speech, but I'm afraid that there are attempts by the government and by others to suppress free speech. So 2.5 cheers for free speech. The half is reserved for those who abuse free speech. I wish they didn't. I wish that CNN and others in the media would show respect for the privilege they have under our Constitution to promote free speech and not abuse it. And I'm going to hold them responsible when they abuse it, and I'm the victim of their abuse. And at the same time, I'm going to defend the right of Assange to publish material as long as it doesn't endanger our troops or our intelligence officers, as long as it's in the public interest. I'm going to encourage that kind of free speech. I'm going to be on the side of John Bolton if he is charged criminally by the government of the United States. I'm going to be on the side of the students, whether I agree with them or not, who have a different point of view about Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. Let them speak, let them be criticized, but let them not be canceled, let them not be suspended, let them not be subject to any legal restrictions. The First Amendment is one of the great experiments in governance. But like democracy itself, as Winston Churchill once said, it may be the worst approach, except for all the others that have been tried over time. So let's support the First Amendment. Let's support the media that uses the First Amendment in an appropriate way to open up dialogue and debate and give us the information necessary for democratic governance. But let's preserve our right to criticize the media when they are wrong. And let's preserve our right to sue the media when they go beyond the First Amendment and engage in malicious and willful distortion of the truth for partisan political purposes. So that's the balance I want to see struck over the First Amendment. This is Alan Dershowitz, and you're watching The Dersh Show, and as I promised you, you'll never be bored. Agree with me? Disagree with me? Let me know. I want to hear from you. Call 216-710-0050 to express your opinion, to ask me a question, to make a comment, or to criticize me. Remember, all calls are recorded, and we might use your question on the show. The Dersh Show is available on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.